Welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book Luis Soares, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. The Strange Case of Luis Soares. I used to say that swapping day for night was a way to return to the true order of things, undoing the mess that society made. The sun is telling people it's time to rest and sleep, while the cool of the night is the real time to live. Free in every action I took, I refused to follow the silly rules society tried to force on me. I'd stay up at night and sleep through the day. Unlike many people who talk big and do little, I actually lived by this plan with a kind of discipline that almost felt noble. For me, dawn was like dusk, and dusk was like the morning. I slept 12 straight hours during the day, 6 in the morning, until 6 at night. I had lunch around 7, dinner at 2 in the morning, and never really had supper. My version of supper was just a cup of hot chocolate, brought to me by my servant at 5 o'clock, right when I got home. I'd sip the chocolate, smoke 2 cigars, crack a few jokes with the servant, read a page or 2 of some novel, and then go to bed. I never read the newspaper. To me, newspapers were the most useless thing in the world, just after Parliament, the works of poets, and church masses. But, don't get me wrong, wasn't against religion, politics, or poetry. I just didn't care about any of it. I looked at all the big important things in life the same way I looked at an ugly woman, with polite indifference. I could have turned into a real villain. But so far, I was just a man with no real purpose. Thanks to a solid inheritance from my dad, I could live exactly how I wanted, avoiding work of any kind, and giving in only to the basic instincts of my nature and the passing whims of what I called my heart. Though heart might be too strong a word. Honestly, I wasn't even sure I had one. I used to joke about it. Whenever a lady asked me to love her, I'd say with a smile, "My sweet girl, I was born with the great advantage of having absolutely nothing in my chest or in my head. This thing people call reason or feeling? Total mystery to me." Soares never really understood poor people because head never felt what they feel. He was born into money, his father had made sure of that, leaving him a solid fortune in his early years. But Soares forgot one important thing. Wealth doesn't last forever if you don't take care of it. Fortune might be generous, but it also demands something in return. It's not like those old myths where the water keeps flowing no matter what. If the bucket leaks too fast, fortune takes her jugs elsewhere. Soares didn't think about any of that. He believed his money would always come back, like the many heads of that mythical Hydra. He spent like there was no tomorrow. Every coin his father had worked so hard to save just flew out of his hands, like birds finally free from a cage. And then without warning, came the crash. One morning yearly, just as the church bells rang for Ave Maria, opened his eyes to find the words written plain as day, like some ancient curse at a doomed feast. It was a letter. His servant handed it to him and said the banker had dropped it off just after midnight. Of course, the servant called midnight noon. That's how they both lived. Time didn't seem real to them. "I told you," Soares snapped. "I only read letters from my friends. Or maybe from some girl." "Oh, I know," the servant replied. That's why I haven't given you the ones from your banker these past few weeks. But today, he insisted. Said it was urgent. Soares sat up in bed, half annoyed, half amused. Wait, are you working for him now or for me? My lord, he said there was danger. Big danger. What kind of danger? I don't know. Let me see the letter. He took it with no concern at all. Read it once. Then again. The message was simple. He had only 6 contos left. 6 contos. To Soares, that was like pocket change. Less than nothing. But this time, something hit different. For the first time in his life, he felt a deep, heavy fear rise inside him. Soares had never really considered the idea of being broke. It just didn't cross his mind. He couldn't imagine a day would come when he'd be like everyone else, forced to work for a living. He ate lunch without appetite and left the house. His first stop was the Alcazar. His friends noticed right away that something was off. They asked if it was heartbreak. Soares said he wasn't feeling well. The girls around him, the kind who always tried to match the mood of whoever seemed troubled, acted sad too. It was as if a wave of sorrow spread through the room. One of his closest friends, Jose Pires, suggested going for a walk in Botafogo. A change of scenery, he thought, might cheer Soares up. Soares agreed, but the truth is, the outing was so ordinary it barely made a difference. Then someone suggested visiting Corcovado, and this time, everyone got excited. The trip was quickly arranged. But what could really distract someone like Soares at a moment like this? The ride up the mountain tired him out more than anything else. And yet, that exhaustion turned out to be exactly what he needed that night. He slept deeply for the first time in days. When he woke up, he sent word for Pires to come over immediately. An hour later, a carriage pulled up outside his house. It was Pires, but he wasn't alone. With him came Vittoria, a dark-haired girl who answered only to that name. They walked into Soares' living room with the ease and noise typical of people who've long dropped any pretense of formality. "Haven't you gotten better?" Vittoria asked Soares as soon as she saw him. "I'm fine," he replied. "But why did you come?" "Oh, come on," Pires cut in before she could answer. "She's my constant companion these days." He turned to Soares. "You wanted to talk to me alone?" "That's right." "Well then, let's chat over there," Pires said, pointing toward a corner of the room. "Vittoria can stay here and look through your photo albums." "No way," Vittoria interrupted. "If that's how it is, I'm leaving. But I have one condition. You two are coming over later. We're having dinner." "Deal," Pires said happily. Vittoria gave them both a quick glance and walked out. Finally, the two men were alone. Pires was the kind of guy who lived for gossip, curious, nosy, always looking for the next bit of drama. When he sensed something serious, he leaned in, ready to hear every last detail. Being trusted by Soares flattered him, and he could tell whatever was coming next was important. He sat back in the armchair, trying to look serious and composed. He put the cane's handle in his mouth like a man thinking hard, and began the conversation like this. "We're alone. What do you want from me?" Soares told him everything. He read the banker's letter out loud, and showed Pires, without shame or filters, the full extent of his ruin. He said he saw no way out, no solution at all. And he admitted, almost in a whisper, that he had spent many hours thinking about ending his life. A suicide? Pyers said, shocked. Are you out of your mind? Out of my mind? Soares replied. But honestly, I don't see another way out of this mess. Besides, it's only half a suicide. Poverty is already half a death. I agree poverty isn't pleasant. Not at all, Pyers said. But he stopped himself mid-sentence. A sudden thought crossed his mind. What if Soares was about to ask him for money? Pyers had a rule: never lend money to friends. You don't lend blood, he used to say. Soares didn't notice his friend's interruption and went on. Living poor after being rich? Impossible. So what do you want from me? Pyers asked, deciding it was best to face the problem head-on. A piece of advice. Advice is useless if you already have one idea stuck in your head. Maybe. But I admit it's not easy to let go of life. Life, good or bad, is always hard to leave behind. And walking around showing off my ruin to people who once saw me rich, that's a humiliation I can't accept. What would you do in my place? Well, Pyers said, there are many ways out. Let me hear one. First idea, go to New York and try to make a fortune. No way. If I leave, I'd rather stay right here in Rio. Second idea, find a rich wife. That's easy to say. But where am I supposed to find her? Look for one. Don't you have a cousin who likes you? I think she doesn't care for me anymore. And besides, she's not rich. She only has 30 contos, that's barely enough for 1 year. Well, Pyers said, that's a decent starting point. Soares didn't say a word at first. The idea sounded strange, but deep down he knew it made sense. Pyers leaned back in his chair, smiling like he already knew the answer. You're thinking about it, right? Pyers asked, still grinning. Admit you like the third idea best. Soares finally nodded slowly. It's not bad, he said. I know it won't be easy or fast, but honestly, I don't have many other options. Exactly, Pyers replied, standing up. Now all you need is some common sense. Yeah, it'll hurt to play nice with your uncle, but remember it's the only way to get rich quick. Your uncle isn't young. One of these days has just gone. So make the most of the time you've got. Pyers grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Come on, let's go eat at Vittoria's place. No thanks, Soares said. I want to start living this new life now. No more distractions. All right then. See you later. Oh, and one more thing, Soares added. This stays between us, okay? Of course, Pyers said. Imaitum. You know that. And with that, he walked out. But somehow, by the next morning, everyone seemed to know what was going on. Boys and girls alike were whispering. Soares was giving up everything just because he had no money left. Even his closest friends looked at him differently, like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Their faces said it all. What a shame. We're losing one of our wild ones. And from that day on, Pyers never came back to visit. Soares' uncle was Major Luis da Cunha Villelaman, in his early 60s, old enough to seem like he could leave any day, though truthfully, he wasn't close to death yet. He lived carefully, almost obsessively, always sticking to his strict routines. That's how he kept going, year after year. The Major was a curious mix, cheerful but strict, loving a good laugh but ready to scold anyone who acted badly. By necessity, he supported the current government, but deep inside, he missed the old monarchy terribly. He complained constantly about how things had changed since then. And when it came to fashion, he held on longer than Most was practically the last man in Rio to stop wearing his hair tied back in a queue. He lived quietly in Katumbi, surrounded by his niece Adelaide and an elderly relative who helped keep house. Life in that home was calm, traditional, almost like something from another time. Major Vidigal didn't care much for what happened beyond his front door. His world was inside his home, where a few friends and neighbors would visit in the evenings, bringing quiet company and warm conversation. Despite his age and the constant ache of his rheumatism, the Major always wore a smile. It might be hard to believe for anyone who suffers from such pains, but it's true he never lost his cheer, even on the worst days. One morning, by pure luck, he woke up feeling better than usual, no pain, no stiffness, and he was laughing and joking with his two female relatives when someone knocked at the door. A servant came in with a calling card. The name written there made the Major raise an eyebrow. Luis Soares. He thought it was a joke. Of all people, he hadn't expected his nephew. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 2 years, and before that, it had been another year and a half. But the boy insisted, "It's really him, sir. Master Luis is waiting in the parlor." And after hearing that, the old man finally believed it. "What do you think, Adelaide?" he asked, looking toward his niece. She didn't answer. The Major got up slowly and walked to the parlor. Luis had spent the last few minutes thinking about how to approach this moment. Falling to his knees felt too dramatic. Rushing into an embrace seemed forced. He didn't feel that kind of emotion, or if he did, he wasn't ready to show it. He considered starting with small talk, pretending he wasn't there to ask for forgiveness. Then, after some casual chat, he could drop the big confession. But that plan didn't sit well with him either. He didn't want a lecture before being welcomed back. Still unsure how to begin, he heard footsteps. The Major appeared at the doorway, silent, his eyes sharp and full of questions. Luis hesitated. Seconds passed. But he knew standing still wouldn't help, so he moved forward and offered his hand. "Uncle," he said, "you don't need to say anything. Your look tells me everything. I've made mistakes, and I regret them. Here I am." Major handed him his hand, and the boy kissed it with all the respect he could show. Then the Major walked to a chair and sat down. The boy remained standing. Looking at him closely, the old man finally spoke. "If your regret is real," he said, "then I open my door and my heart to you. But if it's not, you can leave right now. I haven't been to the opera in years. He don't enjoy actors." Soares quickly swore he was sincere. He admitted he had lived carelessly, even recklessly, but now, at 30, he wanted to grow up. He realized now that his uncle had always been right. At first, he thought the old man was just being grumpy, like many older people tend to be. But wasn't it normal for someone like him raised without discipline to act foolishly? Thankfully, he was changing in time. What he truly wanted now was to start living well, and the first step was taking a public job that would force him to work and become serious. He needed to build something real for himself. As Soares spoke, the major studied him carefully, trying to see past the words. Was the boy really honest? Or was this another performance? For a moment, the old man believed him. He almost saw a tear in his nephew's eyes, though no tear came, not even a fake one. When Soares finished, the major reached out again and took the young man's hand firmly in his own. "I believe you, Luis," he said. "I'm glad you came back before it was too late. What you were living before wasn't life or death, it was something in between. Real life deserves more dignity, and real death deserves more peace than what you were wasting away. You're coming home now like the son who returns. You'll have the best seat at the table. This family is still your family." The major kept speaking in that tone, full of pride and forgiveness. Soares listened quietly, head slightly lowered, as if accepting the punishment he knew he deserved. Deep inside, he thought this was only the beginning of the suffering he'd have to endure a small price for all his sins. Finally, the major stood and led the boy inside where lunch was waiting. In the dining room were Adelaide and the old relative. Donna Antonia de Muravillela greeted Soares with loud expressions of joy, which made the young man blush deeply, not from pride, but from true embarrassment. Soares walked into the dining room, and Adelaide barely acknowledged him with a nod, not even looking up. He returned the greeting politely. The major noticed the coldness between them, but didn't seem surprised. He gave one of those quiet, bitter laughs of his, something he often did when he knew more than he let on. They all sat down for lunch. The meal went by with the major cracking jokes, Donna Antonia scolding Soares for things he'd done or not done, Soares trying to explain himself, and Adelaide staying completely silent. When lunch was over, the major turned to his nephew and said, "Go ahead, smoke if you want." It was a rare permission, one that Soares accepted hesitantly. The two women left the table, and the men stayed behind. The major leaned back and asked, "So, are you really ready to work now?" "Yes, uncle," Soares replied. "Good. I'll see what I can do to find you a job." "Any preference?" "No, sir. Whatever you think best, as long as I work." "All right then. Take this letter tomorrow to one of the ministers. Let's hope it works out without too much trouble. I want to see you working hard, acting seriously. Want to see you become a man. Fooling around gets you nowhere, only debts and headaches." "You have any debts?" "None," Soares answered. But he was lying. There was one small debt to a tailor he hadn't paid yet. He wanted to settle it quietly, without his uncle ever finding out. The next day, the major wrote the letter as promised, and Soares took it straight to the minister. Things went better than expected, and within a month, he landed a solid position at a government office with a decent salary. To be fair, Soares really did make an effort. Changing his old habits wasn't easy, it was a big sacrifice. Anyone who knew how he used to live wouldn't have believed he could pull it off. But maybe that's exactly why he did it, so he could keep living the way he wanted later on. This new life, the job, the discipline, it was just a pause, a temporary break from the real thing. Deep down, he was counting the days until he could go back to being himself again, spending time with Aspasia, hanging out with Alcibiades, and enjoying life without worries. Soares' uncle suspected nothing, but he worried the boy might try to run away again. Maybe memories of his wild past would pull him back, or maybe the boredom and exhaustion of real work would finally push him over the edge. The old man wanted to stop that from happening. Soares needed something new, something big to keep him grounded. That's when the idea came: politics. The major believed politics could fix everything. It was like medicine for a sick man, though anyone could tell you that ambition has a way of mixing with old habits. Lovelace and Turgot rarely stay in separate corners of the mind. But Soares didn't discourage his uncle. He said it made sense for him to end up in politics. He even went so far as to say he'd dreamed about having a seat in Parliament. "Then I'll make that happen," the uncle replied. "But first, you must study. Learn how politics really works. Read about our government, our parliament. And above all, keep being the serious young man you are now." The major spoke well, but Soares acted better. From that day on, he buried himself in books. He read every debate transcript he could find. He didn't live with his uncle, but he spent all his free time there. After dinner, simple, family-style, he'd go home. Those meals were nothing like the wild parties of his younger days. I won't say there was no connection between who he was before and who he became. I won't say the man who left Nido never returned, even briefly, to his old life. But if he did, no one knew. Or almost no one. Only a few lucky souls in those distant places ever saw him return, like an exile slipping through shadows. It was strange, really. Because in this country, once you leave, you're not allowed back, not officially. Unlike England, where people can choose their loyalties, here your birthplace owns you forever. Still, Soares managed to slip away now and then. He met with Pyers, just like before. He was sitting there, puffing a Cuban cigar and telling old stories of love conquests, the kind that made him sound like a real Casanova. That's just how he was, Soares' old friend, showing his loyalty in the only way he knew how. 5 months had passed since Luis got the job through his uncle, Major Vallela, and so far, not a single complaint had come from the office heads. It almost seemed too good to be true. On the outside, Luis looked like a saint, calm, quiet, disciplined. But scratch beneath the surface and you'd find something else entirely. And now, this devil had spotted his next target, his cousin Adelaide. She was 24, and at the peak of her beauty. Tall, graceful, with a face carved like those in ancient statues. Her forehead was high and wide, her eyes sharp and dark, her nose slightly curved. Anyone who watched her for even a moment could see she had fire inside, passion and willpower burning together. Maybe you remember how coldly she treated Luis when they met. And maybe you also remember what he told his friend Pyers, that he had once been loved by his cousin. Well, now you know why. Adelaide had loved him. Not the usual cousinly affection born from growing up together, but a deep, sudden, powerful feeling. She gave everything she had to that love, while he was already chasing other women and barely noticed her heart breaking. A mutual friend, knowing how deeply she felt, once asked Luis why he didn't marry her. He answered without emotion, Anyone with my money doesn't need to get married. But if I did, it would only be to someone richer. Her family's fortune was just a fifth of his. For her, marrying him was a dream. For him, it was a bad deal. The friend, shocked, couldn't help but tell Adelaide everything. That's how she found out. That's why she acted the way she did. She felt the blow deeply, though not so much because it proved she wasn't loved, but more because it took away even the right to be respected. Soares' confession was like undeniable proof. His friend might have expected to gather what was left of her heart after the defeat, but Adelaide, the moment she heard what he'd said, dismissed the messenger with clear eyes and a cold heart. That was the end of it, or so it seemed. When Soares returned to his uncle's house, things became painfully awkward for Adelaide. She now had to live under the same roof as a man she couldn't even respect. As for him, he also felt uneasy, not because he regretted what had said, but because he thought his uncle knew nothing about it. But the old man actually did know. He was aware of Adelaide's feelings and also of how Soares had rejected them. Maybe he didn't know every exact word that had been repeated to her by his nephew's friend, but if he didn't have the letter, he understood the spirit. He realized that Soares had started avoiding his cousin precisely because he knew she loved him, and that Adelaide, once hurt, had begun to resent him in return. For a while, the Major even believed that Soares had left home simply to escape from being near Adelaide. She was the daughter of his late brother, a very rich man, just as strange and unpredictable as the Major himself. Her father had died 10 years earlier, leaving her completely in the care of her uncle. Since the girl's father had traveled often, most of his fortune had probably vanished on those long trips. By the time he passed away, all that remained was around 30 contos, which the Major had kept untouched as a dowry for his ward. Soares tried to handle the situation the best he could. He avoided talking to his cousin, only exchanging the necessary words to keep his uncle from suspecting anything. She did the same. But who can truly control their heart? Slowly, almost without noticing, Adelaide began to feel again the old affection she once had for him. He tried sincerely to fight it, but you can't stop a plant from growing unless you pull its roots. And the roots were still there. Despite the girl's efforts, love slowly took over where hatred once stood. If her suffering had been great before, now it was enormous. A battle raged inside her between pride and affection. She kept everything to herself. Not a word escaped her lips. Luis Soares noticed that whenever his fingers brushed against his cousin's, she would tremble with emotion, blushing one moment, pale the next. He was no stranger to love's waters. He knew when to sail calm seas and when to brace for storms. He became certain that his cousin loved him again. But this discovery didn't bring joy, it brought irritation. He feared that his uncle, if he figured out the girl's feelings, might suggest marriage. And if he refused, wouldn't that risk losing the inheritance he so eagerly anticipated? To have the inheritance without the wedding, that was his dream. Giving me wings while tying my feet, he thought, is like sentencing me to a golden cage. That's the fate of a pet parrot. I don't want any part of it. His fears came true. The Major uncovered the cause of his niece's sadness and decided to end the situation by proposing the marriage to his nephew. Soares couldn't outright refuse without endangering the whole foundation of his fortune. "This marriage," said the uncle, "will complete my happiness. In one move, I unite two people I care for deeply, and I can die in peace, without regrets. In short, you will agree?" "I accept, uncle," replied Louis. "But I must say this, marriage should be built on love, and I don't love my cousin. Well then, you'll grow to love her. Just get married first. I don't want to hurt her. What if she ends up disappointed? Disappointed? Nonsense. The Major laughed gently. I enjoy hearing such poetic words from you, but marriage isn't poetry. Of course, it helps if the two people already feel some affection before they tie the knot. And I believe you do. I was sitting in my study one afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the wooden floor, when my uncle called me in. He was a tall man, still strong despite his years, and there was something about him, some quiet authority that always made me listen carefully whenever he spoke. Young love, he began, is a fire that burns bright but fades fast. Poetry's full of it, and even prose sometimes dares to mention it. But real life doesn't run on passion alone. Marriage needs more than just feelings, it needs understanding, shared values, respect. I looked at him quietly, unsure where this was going. You know I would never force you into anything, he said, almost gently. But I do ask this, marry your cousin. Not now, not tomorrow, but soon. Give it some time, grow fond of her, and then make her your wife. It would bring me great joy. I hesitated, but only for a moment. Yes, uncle, I said. He smiled, satisfied with my answer. I hadn't really agreed to anything, not truly. I had simply postponed the decision. Later, he spoke to Adelaide, my cousin. She was young, quiet, and always seemed to carry herself with a kind of cold grace. To her, he said, you may yet have a future with him. Don't lose a hope. It was the first time he'd ever mentioned such a thing, and she looked surprised, perhaps even shocked. That pleased him. Do you think, he asked, that because I'm old, I can't see what's right in front of me? He smiled warmly. I see everything, Adelaide. Even the things people try to hide. She couldn't hold back her tears. But when he tried to comfort her with words of hope, she shook her head. No hope, she whispered. Trust me, he said. Now, Adelaide wasn't naive. She understood that while my uncle meant well, his involvement might give me the wrong impression that she wanted me, that she was waiting for me. And that idea wounded her pride deeply. She went to him again, troubled by this thought. My uncle only smiled kindly and tried to ease her worries. Days passed, and nothing more was said. I enjoyed the time I had been given, free from pressure. Adelaide returned to her usual self-distant, composed as if nothing had changed. And maybe nothing had. But I could see it. I knew why she acted that way. And each time she gave me that cold look, I couldn't help but smile just a little. Soares hadn't changed. That was clear now. Every time they were alone together, he was the first to pull away. He treated her the same way he always had, with quiet indifference. She could feel it deep inside. He doesn't love me, she told herself, and he never will. One morning, Major Vilela received a letter that read, My brave Major, I just arrived from Bahia and will come see you this afternoon. Get dinner ready, and don't forget the vatapa iam. Sure you won't treat me like any ordinary guest. Your friend Anselmo. The Major grinned. Great news! Anselmo's here. Aunt Antonia, make sure we have good vatapá ready. Anselmo Barroso de Vasconcelos had returned from Bahia. A wealthy farmer and war veteran, he was 78, but still strong and full of life. He had been a close friend of Adelaide's father, who introduced him to the Major. After her father passed away, the two men grew even closer. Anselmo had stayed by his friend until the very end, and mourned him like a brother. Their shared tears sealed a bond between him and the Major that nothing could break. That afternoon Anselmo arrived full of energy and laughter, as if youth had found him again. He hugged everyone warmly, and gave Adelaide a kiss on the cheek. "You've grown into such a beautiful young woman," he said proudly. "Please don't tease me," she replied shyly. "I wouldn't dream of it," he said. "I was your father's closest friend. Poor man, he died in my arms." Soares, who had been quietly suffering through the dull routine of life at his uncle's house, felt a spark of joy seeing the lively old man. Anselmo was like fireworks, bright, loud, and full of movement. But Anselmo didn't seem to take a liking to Soares. "I'm sorry to hear that," the Major said. "Soares is a serious young man." "I think he's too serious," Anselmo replied. "A boy who never laughs." Before he could finish, something interrupted what he was about to say. Later that night, after dinner, Anselmo turned to the Major and asked, "How many will there be tomorrow?" 15, the Major answered. "December?" "You betcha December," Anselmo replied. "So, tomorrow, the 15th, I need to meet with you and all of Adelaide's family. If the steamboat runs late just one day, it'd really mess things up." The meeting took place the next day as planned. Everyone was there. Major Faria, Soares, young Adelaide, and Dona Antonia, the only living relatives of her late father. Today marks 10 years since this girl's father passed away. Anselmo began, gently pointing toward Adelaide. "As you all know, Dr. Bento Varela was my dearest friend, and I've always made sure to honor his love and trust until the very end. You knew him, he was brilliant but unpredictable. His whole life was full of wild ideas. He dreamed up 20 grand plans, each more ambitious than the last, but rarely finished any of them. His mind was always racing ahead to the next big thing before he'd even started the first." "That's right," the Major said, cutting in softly. "I held him in my arms when he died. And as his final gift to me, he gave me a sealed letter. He told me to open it only after 10 years, and only with his closest family around." Anselmo reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old envelope sealed with black wax. "This is it," he said, holding it up. "It hasn't been opened. I don't know exactly what's inside, but I can guess from some things he told me back then." Everyone leaned in, eyes wide with curiosity. Before he passed, Anselmo continued, "My dear friend handed over most of his fortune to me." "Yes, almost all of it. Only 30,000 reis went directly to the girl. I got 300,000 reis from him, money I've kept untouched until today, and now I must return it according to the instructions in this letter." A wave of surprise passed through everyone, followed quickly by one of anxious curiosity. What could be the mysterious wish of Adelaide's father? Dona Antonia remembered that, back when she was young, she had once been in love with the dead man. For a moment she allowed herself to dream that the old eccentric might have thought of her at death's door. "There it is again, Bento's doing," said Major Vasconcelos, taking a pinch of snuff. He always loved secrets, surprises, wild ideas. May he rest in peace, of course, if he even sinned at all. Anselmo had already opened the letter. Everyone leaned in closer. The veteran read aloud. "My dear, most trusted Anselmo, I ask you for one last favor. You hold most of my fortune in your hands, and I say most only because I must speak of my beloved daughter, Adelaide. Keep those 300,000 reis safe for 10 years. At the end of that time, read this letter in front of my family. If, by then, my daughter Adelaide is still alive and married, give her the money. But if she is not married, still give her the money with one condition. She must marry my nephew Luis Soares, son of my sister Luisa. I care deeply for him, and although he is already rich, I want him to inherit this fortune together with my daughter. But if she refuses to accept this condition, then keep all the money for yourself." When Anselmo finished reading, silence fell over the room, a stunned silence, shared even by Anselmo himself, who hadn't known what the letter contained. Soares stared at Adelaide. She looked down at the floor. As the quiet stretched on, Anselmo finally broke it. "I, like all of you, didn't know what this letter would say," he said. "But I'm glad it arrived just in time to carry out my late friend's final wish." "No doubt about it," said the major. At that, the young woman lifted her eyes without thinking, looking straight at her cousin. Their eyes met. The joy and tenderness in his eyes were unmistakable, and the young woman watched him for a moment. A smile, not mocking this time, touched the young man's lips. She smiled too, but with such cold indifference, it was as if she had brushed off the teasing of a courtier. Anselmo stood up. "Now that you both know the truth," he said to his cousins, "I hope you can make your decision. And since the outcome is clear, I offer my congratulations in advance. But if you'll excuse me, I must be going. I have other matters to attend to." Once Anselmo left, the gathering broke apart. Adelaide went to her room with her elderly relative. The uncle and nephew remained in the sitting room. "Luis," said the older man, "you are the luckiest man alive." "Do you really think so, uncle?" asked the young man, trying not to show how happy he felt. "You truly are. You've got a beautiful girl who loves you deeply. Out of nowhere, fortune falls into your hands, and it comes with only one condition, that you marry her. Even the dead are working in your favor." "I assure you, uncle," Luis replied, "money doesn't matter much here. If I decide to marry my cousin, it will be for other reasons. Oh, I know wealth isn't everything, it never is. Still, it counts for something. It's better to have 300,000 reis than 30,000. Wouldn't you agree? That all makes it worth considering. But I won't tell you to marry her unless you feel some real affection for her. Don't forget what I told you before, marrying badly, even with money, is still a bad marriage." "I couldn't agree more, uncle. That's why I haven't given my answer yet, and I want just now. If I grow fond of her, then yes, I'd be ready to accept this unexpected fortune." As the reader might have guessed, Soares had already made up his mind about marrying her. Rather than wait for his uncle's death, he thought it wiser to claim the generous inheritance right away. After all, It was almost as if the voice from beyond the grave had commanded him to do so. Soares also counted on Adelaide's deep respect for her late father. That night, Luis Soares barely slept. His dreams were wild and vivid, filled with the promise of distant lands and forbidden pleasures. In his mind's eye, he saw a harem perfumed with the finest spices of Arabia, its floors covered in rich Persian rugs. On soft divans sat the most beautiful women in the world, their eyes dark and inviting. A Circassian dancer moved gracefully at the center of the room, her hips swaying to the gentle rhythm of an ivory tambourine. But just as the dream reached its peak, a furious eunuch stormed into the hall, sword drawn. With a single brutal motion, he drove the blade deep into Soares' chest. Luis woke up gasping, heart pounding, unable to fall asleep again. The next morning, he got up earlier than usual and wandered the streets, trying to clear his head before lunch and another day at the office. His plan was already set. He would slowly lower his guard, pretending to give in to Adelaide's influence. It was all part of the game. Money was on the line, after all. So every move had to be handled with care. He needed to be patient, subtle like a diplomat. Truth be told, despite his cleverness, Soares wasn't always sure what he wanted. His character was full of doubt, shifting from one mood to the next. When his uncle had first suggested marrying Adelaide, had said numero back then, he claimed not to want the life of a kept man. And yet, here he was, facing the same choice, wealth in exchange for a kind of captivity. The difference now was that the money wouldn't take years to come. It would arrive the moment they married. 300 contos, he thought. More than enough to make me someone new. Just imagine what people will say. Convinced of his own future happiness, Soares began his campaign. The battlefield was Adelaide's heart, and truthfully, the fortress had already fallen. He searched for her gaze, met it shyly, and silently begged for the love he had once refused. Soares never missed a chance to brush his hand against hers at the dinner table. Had let the touch linger, hoping it might mean something. If she pulled her hand away, he didn't get discouraged, not at all. When they were alone together, he no longer avoided her like he used to. Instead, he'd say something, anything, just to keep the conversation going. And Adelaide always answered politely, but with a coldness that made it clear. She wasn't interested. She wants me to pay high prices for her fish, Soares thought to himself one day. He finally decided to push further. One afternoon, Adelaide was playing the piano when Soares walked in, unnoticed. She played beautifully, completely lost in the music. By the time she finished, he was standing right behind her. "That was incredible," he said, almost whispering. "Let me kiss those hands, they're touched by genius." Adelaide turned and looked at him, serious as ever. Without a word, she grabbed her handkerchief from the piano and walked out of the room. That moment told Soares just how hard this would be. Still, he believed in himself not because he felt strong or brave, but because he had this quiet hope, like a lucky star shining over him. It's tough swimming upstream, he told himself, but people do it all the time. You don't need to be Alexander the Great to take over a city that doesn't even fight back. But disappointment kept coming. If it weren't for the dream of wealth, he probably would have given up long ago. One day he decided to write her a letter. Talking face to face had always been too hard. But a letter, even if she hated him, would at least be read. She didn't even open it. She sent it back through the young servant boy who had delivered it. The second letter met the same fate. When he tried a third time, the boy refused to take it. For a moment, Soares felt like a fool. Maybe he wasn't in love after all. Maybe he was starting to hate her. If they ever got married, he realized, he might treat her like an enemy. The whole situation was becoming absurd. Actually, it already was absurd, he just hadn't seen it until now. To escape the embarrassment, he decided to make one final move, and make it big. At the first opportunity, he confessed everything. He poured out his feelings, begged, sighed, maybe even cried a little. He gave her the kind of speech you only make once, the kind that leaves nothing hidden. He looked her in the eyes and spoke with a trembling voice. "I was wrong," he said. "I didn't understand you before, but I see it now. I regret everything. I truly do." He paused, trying to find the strength in his words. "Your presence, your love, it broke me. It made me see who I really am." "Break you?" she asked, confused. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," he replied, his voice rising. "The power you have over me, your beauty, your love. Don't think I'm lying. I feel things now that I never felt before. I'm so in love, I could do something crazy." "Crazy like what?" "Like ending my own life." "What would life be without your love? Tell me that. What would it be worth?" She didn't answer right away. She just stared at him, silent, her face unreadable. He dropped to his knees in front of her. "So whether it's death or happiness," he said, "I want to receive it on my knees." Adelaide smiled, but not with joy. She looked at him slowly and said, 300 contos. That's a lot of money to buy someone so small." Then she turned and walked away. Louis stood there, frozen. He stayed on his knees, eyes locked on her back as she walked slowly toward the house. His body felt heavy, crushed by shame. He hadn't expected this from her, not such cold, quiet revenge. No anger, no yelling. Just calm, total indifference. He had suffered when he lost his money. But now, with his pride shattered, the pain was worse. Much worse. Adelaide went inside, calm and sure of herself. She seemed ready for what had just happened. As soon as she entered, she went straight to her uncle. "I respect my father's memory deeply," she told him, "but I can't obey him. I want to marry Louis." Her uncle, the major, looked surprised. "But you loved him once, didn't you?" "I did." "And now you love someone else?" "No." "Then why this decision?" Adelaide explained clearly what had happened since Soares arrived, how he had changed, how he had become cold and ambitious, and the scene in the garden. The major listened carefully. He tried to defend his nephew, to find excuses for him. But deep down he agreed with her. He believed Soares had become a man of bad character. Later, when Soares finally calmed his anger, he entered the house and said goodbye to his uncle, promising to return the next day. Adelaide told her father's friend every detail about the events that forced her to break the condition written in the posthumous letter given to Anselmo. Because of this refusal, the fortune would now belong entirely to Anselmo, but the girl was happy with what she already had. Anselmo didn't accept defeat so easily. Before giving up completely, he decided to visit Luis Soares to see what he thought. When the major's nephew saw the farmer arrive, he immediately guessed it had something to do with the marriage plan. Anselmo was sharp-minded, and even though Soares tried to act like an innocent victim, Anselmo quickly understood that Adelaide was right all along. That was it. Everything was over. Anselmo prepared to leave for Bahia and announced his decision to the major's family. On the evening before his departure, everyone was gathered in the living room when Anselmo suddenly said, "Major, you're getting better and stronger. I believe a trip to Europe would really help your health. This young lady here would also enjoy seeing Europe, and I'm sure Donna Antonia, despite her age, might want to go too. As for me, I'll give up Bahia and travel with you instead. Do you agree with my idea?" "Man," replied the major, "we need to think about it." "Think? No thinking. If you start thinking, you'll never get on the boat. What do you say, miss?" "I obey my uncle," answered Adelaide. "And besides," added Anselmo, "now that Donna Adelaide has come into a large fortune, she'll surely want to see the beautiful things abroad so she can better appreciate what we have here at home." "Yes," said the major, "but you speak as if it were a huge sum. 300 contos. That's yours. Mine. Am I some kind of thief? Why should I care about the whim of a generous friend? The money belongs to this girl. Who is its rightful heir? Not to me, not that I need it, since I already have more than enough." "That's noble of you, Anselmo. But what else could I be if not that?" And so the European trip was settled. Luis Soares listened to the whole conversation without saying a word. But deep down, he couldn't help but feel a spark of hope at the thought of maybe traveling with his uncle. The next day, that hope turned into a painful disappointment. Major Soares told him that before leaving he would leave his nephew under the care of the minister. Luis tried everything he could to go along with the family. Was it greed for his uncle's fortune? A wish to see new places? Or was it revenge against his cousin? Maybe it was all of that. In the end, his last bit of hope vanished completely. The family left without him. Left behind, poor and alone, with nothing ahead but hard work, no dreams for the future, and worse than all that, wounded pride. Feeling defeated, Luis made the saddest choice a man can make. One night, the servant heard a gunshot coming from his room. He ran in and found only a lifeless body. Piers heard the news on the street and hurried to Vittoria's house, where he found her getting ready in front of the mirror. "Did you hear what happened?" he asked. "No, what is it?" "Soares killed himself." "When?" "Just now." "Poor guy. Are you serious?" "I am." "Are you going out?" "Yes, I'm going to the Alcazar." "They're singing Bar Blue tonight, right?" "That's right." "Then I'll come too." And as he spoke, he started humming the tune from Bar Blue. That was the only funeral song Luis Soares ever got from those who called themselves his closest friends.
Thank thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.